Metro 2035, Dmitry Glukhovsky, Chapter 3, The Pipe. The ceilings at the station were low to suit people, but the tunnels had not been built for people. They measured 5 meters from wall to wall, and the floor and ceiling were separated by the same distance. Far away at the other end of the metro, there dwelt wild savages who believed that the tunnels were passages dug through the solid ground by the great worm, the god who created the earth and gave birth to human beings from out of his belly. And it was only afterwards that people had repudiated their creator and adapted these passages for their own needs. And instead of the worm, they had built trains of metal for themselves and started themselves the lie that they had existed in the beginning, and there had never been any worm. Why not believe in a god like that? He was better adapted to a life underground. The tunnels were dark and frightening. The groundwater oozed into them in little rivulets and threatened to smash through the cast-iron tunnel linings at any moment and engulf entire lines. The rivulets gave off water vapor, and the cold mist prevented the light of torches from penetrating very far. The tunnels had not been created for man, no doubt about that, and man had not been created for the tunnels. Even here, only 300 meters away from the station, it felt creepy, and the men prattled to drown out the whispering dread. The campfire of half-dried billets smoked slightly. The tunnel, of course, was alive. It wheezed as it breathed, drawing in the hazy smoke from the campfire with its perforated lungs, savoring it, as if it was smoking a cigarette. The smoke whirled and eddied, then flew upwards, disappearing into the shaggy, overgrown bronchial tubes of the ventilation shafts. A little distance away stood the hand-powered rail trolley on which the watch had arrived. It was 300 meters to the station. If someone advanced towards Exhibition Station out of the northern darkness, the watch had to bear the brunt of the attack, sacrificing their lives if necessary, and send one survivor to the station to warn people, so that the children would have time to hide, and the women could take guns and join the men in blocking off the entrance with their own bodies. It had always worked. That was why Exhibition Station was still here, still inhabited after 2.5 decades. But for the last couple of years, if anyone had ever turned up here, it was only by mistake. The final terrible threat to both the station and the metro as a whole, the Dark Ones, had disappeared, annihilated by a barrage of missiles about 2 years ago, and everyone at the station remembered who had saved the station from those brutes. Artyom. Now to the north of Exhibition there was only a chain of frozen, empty stations, of which the first was Botanical Gardens. That station lay very close to the surface, and the hermetic doors that were supposed to cut off the world on the surface from the world down below stood wide open and broken. It was impossible to live at Botanical Gardens, and people weren't interested in what came beyond it. So the limit to which the light of the camp extended marked the precise end of the world. Everything after that was outer space. The watchmen sat there, walled off from the vacuum by sandbags heaped up into parapets. Their Kalashnikovs were arranged in a pyramid, leaning against each other. A battered, smoke-blacked kettle warmed its belly on the flames. Artyom sat down with his face towards the campfire, setting the back of his head towards the emptiness of the tunnel. He sat Homer down right beside him. Artyom had deliberately brought his visitor into this quiet void, as he didn't want to listen to the old man's story back there beside the bicycles in front of everyone. He couldn't do it completely without witnesses, but at least let there be as few as possible. "You shouldn't sit with your back to the pipe," Levashov hissed at him. But Artyom trusted this pipe just at the moment. He had learned to feel it. The others had sat down so as to keep their eyes trained on the open mouth of the tunnel. Homer had been warned to tell his tale quietly in order not to excite the others, but Homer didn't know how to do things quietly. The town is called Polar Dawns. It's up on the Kola Peninsula. There's an atomic power station close by, and in working order, too, note. The station has an operational life of over 100 years in reserve because it's only powering one town, and the town has been transformed into a fortress. They built a log stockade and other fortifications. Organized sound defenses. There were military units close by guarding the power station, and the garrison of Polar Dawns was drawn from them. The area around it is deadly. The far north, but they're holding out. The station provides them with light and warmth for farming, so stop making it all up, will you? Levashov shouted from the other side of the campfire. He had red eyes, fleshy ears, and a higgledy-piggledy mustache that pointed upwards. What fucking dawns are you talking about? After Botanical, there's no one in the pipe at all, apart from the wandering dogs. As if one crackpot wasn't enough, now another one's shown up. They'll have their own club here now, said Armenchik, winking and picking at his teeth with his fingernail to winkle out a fiber of pork that was stuck between them. The Crimson Sails Dreamers and Romantics Club. Who picked up the signal? Who talked to them? Asked Artyom, looking at the old man's beard and his moving lips, trying to read them like a deaf man. Homer began. I'm from that part of the world myself, from Arkhangelsk. So I kept hoping to find someone, thinking maybe some of my folks had survived. I kept listening and searching, and eventually I found something. There was nothing from my Arkhangelsk, that's true, but polar dawns? An entire town, can you imagine it? Up on the surface, hot water, light. But the most fascinating thing is that they have an electronic library still intact, on magnetic media and CDs. The whole of world literature and cinema. Do you understand? They have all the electricity they could need. What's the wavelength? What's the frequency? Artyom asked abruptly, interrupting Homer's cozy narrative. So it's a kind of Noah's Ark, which hasn't saved all the animals 2 by 2, but the entire culture of our civilization. The old man continued as if he hadn't heard. When was the contact? How frequent was it? Where was your radio set located? What kind of equipment was it? From what height did you pick up the signal? So why didn't anything work for me? The old man had been expecting a conversation, not an interrogation. A cozy conversation beside the fire. But Artyom wanted this moment too much to waste it on rose-tinted schmaltz. The first thing he had to do was make sure this was true. Artyom knew all about the vague mirages that loomed up in the desert on the surface. He didn't want to admire them. He wanted to touch them, believe in them. Well, he wouldn't let it go, kept pushing. He couldn't let the old man slip out of his grasp. Remember exactly, why doesn't it work for me any longer? Homer began, smacking his lips and pondering, turning his eyes away towards the darkness and eventually giving in. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? How's that possible for you not to know, if you picked up the signal yourself? The old man squirmed a bit in embarrassment and then confessed. The bastard. I wasn't the one who picked it up. I just happened to meet this man, a radio operator. He told me. Where? Where did you meet him? What station? The old man sighed a bit more. Teatralnaya station, I think. Teatralnaya. Smack in the hottest spot in the metro, that is? Do you think I'm scared of going and checking for myself? I don't think anything of the kind, young man, Homer said in a dignified fashion. When? A couple of years ago. I don't remember. He doesn't remember. The only time that Artyom had heard someone's distant, weak voice in the jagged gaps between the hissing and the howling of the airwaves had been imprinted on his mind forever. And even now, he only had to start listening for that sound to ring in his ears like the dried-up voice of the sea in a seashell. How could anyone forget something like that? How could anyone dream all his life about writing a book for his descendants, for the future generations, so that those generations would know where they came from, so that they wouldn't lose the dream of one day returning to the surface, and not remember every little detail of something like that? And at Teatralnaya, too. You're lying, said Artyom, quite certain. You just want me to like you. You're mistaken. You want me to like you so that I'll spill all the beans for you. My entire sodding story. You decided to win me over, right? You probed for a soft spot and sank in the hook, right? Certainly not. It's an absolutely real event. Come off it. Oh, said hook-nosed Armenchik, sucking in his snot with relish. The dreamers are arguing over whose dream is dreamier. Infuriated with himself and this stupid old liar, Artyom laid the back of his head against a bullet-riddled sandbag and squeezed his eyelids together. Fucking fantasist. As soon as your soul grows a scab over itself, someone comes along and picks it off. The old man frowned and didn't attempt to change Artyom's mind. Screw him anyway. They didn't say another word to each other until the end of the watch. As they emerged into the station, Artyom didn't even exchange glances with the old man in farewell. "There's reliable information. A signal's been picked up from the Kola Peninsula. There are survivors there," said Artyom, glancing at Kirill significantly. "Honestly?" "Ho, Nestle!" Kirill jumped up in the air. He was so delighted. He judged his breathing wrongly and started coughing violently. Knowing what would come next, Artyom gave him a handkerchief. When Kirill recovered, he tore the handkerchief away from his mouth and examined it with a frightened, guilty look that wrung Artyom's heart. "It will all pass. You'll go chasing rats again. It's no big deal, just a little bit of blood." "Mom scolds me. Don't show her." "You won't show her, will you?" "Oh, come on, will you? You and me, we're like that. A team. You don't squeal on me, I don't squeal on you. Swear on the Order. I swear on the Order. Swear solemnly." "I swear solemnly on the Order." Kirill clambered up onto his knees. "Come on, tell me." "Well," said Artyom, "there's definite information. A signal was picked up from the north, from the Kola Peninsula. An atomic power station has survived there completely untouched. And there's a town beside it. It's called Polar Dawns. Beautiful, eh? So we're not here alone. Do you understand that, Kiryuk? We're not alone. There are other survivors, too, and we found them. How about that?" "Wow, cool," said Kirill, gazing at Artyom with his huge, pale eyes. "But is it really true?" "It is really true. And that power station makes enough electricity to keep the whole town warm all year round. And they've built a huge glass dome over the town. Can you imagine that?" "Nah-uh. Like a glass, only big." "What for?" "To keep the heat in. Outside there's a snowy blizzard, but inside the weather's fine and warm. Trees and blossom, just like in that book of yours. And fruit orchards with apples in them. And tomatoes, by the way. People walking along the streets in their t-shirts. There's heaps and heaps of food. All sorts sweet things. And the toys aren't like what you have, those used cartridge cases. All different sorts of toys." Kiryuka squeezed his eyes shut, diligently trying to imagine all this. He coughed a couple of times with his mouth closed quietly, restraining himself. Breathed out long and slow. He probably couldn't imagine it. Artyom himself couldn't. And in summer, this dome opens up and they live in the open air. Not under the ground, but outside, in houses with windows. Through the windows, they can see the other houses, or the forest, for instance. That's the way they live. Everything clean, dry, and fresh. Right out in the sun. And in air like that, not a single microbe can survive. They all die. And people walk along the street without any gas masks. "All the microbes? And Tuber dies too?" asked Kirill, instantly wide awake. "All of them! And Tuber, first of all." "So I can just go there and breathe without a gas mask in order to be cured?" "I think so," said Artyom. "Yes. Here in the tunnels, the damp, stuffy air makes things really easy for the Tuber, but fresh air means instant death for it." "Wow! I have to tell Mom. She'll be so happy. And are you going to go there?" "Well, now, this place Polar Dawns is very far away. It's not that easy to get there. You have to build up your strength. I'll build mine up. How much do I need?" asked Kirill, bouncing on Artyom's knee. "You need a lot. Do you know how long it takes to get there? On all-terrain troop transports, probably 6 months. Across the surface, through the forests and the swamps, along the ruined roads." "Well, so what? I'll get there." "Nah, I probably won't take you with me. I'll only go with other soldiers from the Order." Why's that?" "Your mother says you don't eat anything. We don't need a wimp like that with us in a troop transport team. Nothing but a burden. And it's a tough journey. Lots of obstacles to overcome. Monsters every step of the way. We'll have to survive lots of adventures. And how are you going to survive them if you don't eat anything? You'll peg out in the very first adventure. No, our Order needs soldiers, not weaklings." "I can't look at those mushrooms any longer. Bah! What about the vegetables? Your mom got you some vegetables. Did you see the tomato? That tomato traveled all the way across the metro from Sebastopol to get to you." "Yuck!" "Exactly the same kind of tomato, by the way, as the tomatoes that grow in the streets and the gardens of that town, Polar Dawns. Come on now, try it. It has a whole ton of vitamins in it." "Okay, I'll eat the tomato then, if it's the same kind that grow there. Get it down you right now, in front of me." Then while I do it, you tell me more about that town and the dome like a glass. Kiruka's mother, Natalia, was standing outside, listening to everything, every single word through the tarpaulin, with shadows flickering across her face and her fingers twisting and twining together. I got him to eat the tomato, Artyom told her with a smile. Why did you tell him that nonsense of yours? He'll drive me crazy with it now, said Natalia, not smiling back at him. Why be so quick to call it nonsense? Maybe the town of Polar Dawns does exist. Let him imagine it. The doctor was here yesterday. He came from Hansa. Artyom forgot what word he was going to say next. He was afraid to guess what Natalia was going to tell him, so he simply didn't think anything. He tried not to think in order not to jinx things. He's got 3 months left. That's all. You and your Polar Dawns. Natalia's mouth twisted out of shape, and Artyom realized what had been in her eyes all the time they were talking. You mean there's absolutely nothing? A film of dried-up tears. Artyom's going to take me to the far north with him in a troop transport. Will you let me go? Asterisk. He thought Anya would be asleep already, or pretending to be asleep. As usual, anything to avoid him. But she was sitting on the bed with her bare legs crossed under her and clutching a half-liter bottle containing something cloudy with both hands, as if she was afraid someone might take it away from her. He caught a whiff of alcohol. Here, she said, holding it out to him. Have a swig. Artyom did as she said, scalding his throat with the homebrew, then held his breath and blinked. It made him a little dizzy and warmed him up a bit. Now what? Sit down, said Anya, slapping the blanket beside her. Sit down, please. He lowered himself onto the spot she had indicated, then half turned his head to glance at her. A simple vest with shoulder straps. The downy fluff on her hands was standing up on end from the cold, the same as she was 2 years ago. Black hair cut short in a boyish style. Thin, pale lips. Nose slightly too big for that delicate face, with a crook in it. But without it, the face would be insipid and boring. Her arms were woven completely out of cables, like the arms of anatomical models, without a trace of girlish softness in them, and the muscles on her shoulders were like epaulets. A long neck, with an artery pulsing rapidly, and that neck bone of hers there. Her collarbones stick out. Those collarbones used to make him want to love her and pity her and torment her until he was all dried up. Sharp nipples showing through the white fabric. Why does a light bulb shine brightly at first and then burn out? Put your arm around me. Artyom reached his arm out and arranged it awkwardly on Anya's shoulder in a brotherly kind of way, or as if he was hugging a child. She leaned slightly towards him, as if she wanted to nestle against him, but all those cables in her remained taut and twisted. And Artyom couldn't loosen up either. He took another swig, hoping. He couldn't do any of the right things either. He'd got out of the habit. Anya touched him. Then she ran her lips across his cheek. Prickly. Artyom shook up the murky liquid in the plastic bottle and downed a really big gulp. His head was full of the far north and an all-terrain vehicle. Let's try, Artyom. Let's try again. We have to. All over again, from the beginning. She lowered her fingers, cold and rough, onto his belt and deftly unhooked the buckle. Kiss me. Come on, kiss me. Yes, Come to me. Wait, just a moment. Well, what's wrong? Take this off me. It's too tight. I want you to undress me. You? Anya. What is it? That's right. Shh. I'm cold. Yes, Come here. That's it, and you too. Come on, take this nasty shirt off. Okay, just a moment. There, God, let me have a swig. Take it. Come on, here, right here, like you used to do. Do you remember? Do you still remember? And, Anichka, well, what are you doing there? Well, you're so... Well, what are you doing? Come on. I'm not used to it anymore. I'm sorry. Let me do it. Why do you have to? Let me have it. Anya. Well, come on, right in here. Do you feel it? Yeah, yes. It's been so long for me. You're completely... Why are you like that? Don't you understand? I need you. Well? Okay, just a moment. It's just been a bad day. Shut up. Quiet. Let me try. Just lie there. Today, Shut up. Close your eyes and shut up. That's it. Right. And now just... Well, what's wrong with you? What? I don't know, it's not working. Well, what? God only knows. No, my head's just full of... What? What's your head so full of? I'm sorry. Get off me. Go away. Anya, where's my vest? Wait, where's my vest? I'm cold. Oh, come on. Don't act this way. You're not the problem. It's not because of you. No more, that's it. And stop trying to fake your feelings. That's not true. Push off. Do you hear? Push off. All right, Where are those fucking panties? That's it. If you don't want to, you don't want to. Or are you all withered up down here? From the radiation? No, of course not. What do you... You just don't want it with me. To have children from me. I told you, it's been a bad day. We don't have any because they know. You don't want them. You're not waiting for them. That's not true. Artyom, I left for you, smashed everything with my father to hell because of you. After that war, after the battle with the Reds, he's in a wheelchair. He can't walk. And they sliced his arm off. Do you at least understand what that means to him? To be an invalid, and I left him, my own father, to be with you? I went against him, against his will. So what can I do about it? He doesn't even think of me as a man. I tried to tell him the whole truth, but he's the one who doesn't want us to be together. What's that to do with me? To have your children. Do you understand that? Yours? I stopped going up on the surface so all my female organs would be healthy. They're like a sponge. The radiation. You know that. Those damned mushrooms. To fit in here in this station of yours. Do you think I see myself? That I see my future like that? I abandoned my duty to sing lullabies to pigs. And for what? But you just carry on. You haven't stopped for a single day. You've completely burnt yourself out down there. Do you understand? Maybe that's why it didn't work for us, and it isn't working now. And I've begged you so many times. Your father has begged you so many times. Sukhoi isn't really... What are you doing it for? You just don't want any children, is that it? You just don't like children, is that it? You don't want any from me? You don't want any at all. You don't give a shit for any of that. The only thing you're fit for is saving the world. But what about me? Here I am. You're letting me go. You're losing me. And you want to lose me, is that it? Anya, why are you... I can't go on like this. I don't want to go on. I don't want to wait. I don't want to beg for sex. I don't want to dream about getting knocked up. And I don't want to be afraid that if I do get knocked up by you, I'll have a monster. That's enough. Shut up. And you will have a monster, Artyom. You're like a sponge, too. You'll pay for every one of your trips to the surface. Don't you understand that? Shut up, you bitch. Go away. Go away, Artyom. Go away and don't come back. I'll go. Yes, go. All this is in a whisper. The shouts are in a whisper. The groans are in a whisper. The crying is in a whisper. All soundless, the way it is with ants. And all the neighbors pretend to be asleep. And everyone knows everything. The protective suit fitted into the bundle perfectly. He put his service Kalashnikov, which he was forbidden to take out of the station, on top of it, with 6 magazines of cartridges bound together in pairs with blue insulating tape and a plastic bag of dried mushrooms. The gas mask stared murkily at him until Artyom closed it in with the zip, yanking it violently like an annoying corpse in a sack. Then he heaved the knapsack onto his shoulders, his own curse, his rock of Sisyphus. Granddad, get up! Collect your things, just don't make any noise! The old man seemed to have been sleeping with his eyes open. He woke up immediately. Where are we going? Did you tell me the truth about Teatralnaya? About that radio operator of yours? About him being there? Yes. Right then. Will you show me the way there? To Teatralnaya? Homer asked hesitantly. You really did think I'd chicken out, eh? Screw that, Granddad. Maybe it's hell for some, but for us it's the field of our military glory. Well, or was it all just lies? No, it wasn't. Come to Teatralnaya with me. I've got to see this man of yours for myself and ask him about everything. Let him give me his radio, so I'll believe it. It was 2 years ago, you know. Let's make an arrangement, the two of us. You lead me to this radio operator and I tell you everything you wanted to ask me about, without hiding a thing. The dark ones, the bright ones, the murky ones, whatever you fancy, the history of my heroic feat. I'll tell you what I haven't told anyone else. The whole fucking Greek tragedy from Alpha to Omega. A deal? Word of honor. Shake on it. Homer held out his hand, slowly and doubtfully, as if he thought Artyom might spit into it, but shook Artyom's hand firmly. While the old man was packing his bedding into his traveling bag, Artyom worked on his self-charging torch, squeezing and releasing the handle and listening to the buzzing of the mechanism as he filled up the battery. That was all he was interested in. Then he broke off. Explain this to me. That book of yours, what's it for? The book? Well, the way things are, we're living here and time has stopped, you understand? There aren't any historians. There's no one to record that we also lived and how, so it's as if our lives are pointless. But that's not true, is it? Homer froze, holding a gray crumpled pillowcase. They'll dig us up in 10,000 years and we didn't write a single line. They'll try to read our bones and our soup bowls to tell who we believed in and what we dreamed about. And they'll get everything wrong. Who'll dig us up, Granddad? Archaeologists, our descendants. Artyom shook his head hard. He licked his lips and tried to restrain the fury seething up in him, but it seared him as if he had puked up bile. But maybe I don't want them to dig you and me up here. I don't want to be bones and bowls in a common grave. I'd rather do the digging myself and not be dug up. There are enough people here who want to while away their lives in a burial mound as it is. I'd rather kick the bucket from an overdose up on the surface than be stuck here in the metro until I'm old and gray. That's no human destiny, Granddad. That's not for human beings. The metro. Descendants. Fuck it. Descendants. I don't want my descendants to be stuck underground all their lives. I don't want my descendants to be food for tuberculosis microbes. I don't want that. Or to slit each other's throats over the last tin of food. I don't want that. Or grunt and sprawl around with the pigs. I don't want that. You're writing a book for them, Granddad, but they won't even be able to read. Their eyes will wither away because they're not needed. Do you understand? But their sense of smell will be as keen as a rat's. They won't be people. Should we breed creatures like that? If there's even just one chance in a million that somewhere out there, at least somewhere, it's possible to live on the surface, under a sky with stars, under the sun. If at least somewhere in this fucking world it's possible just to breathe through your mouth and not through a rubber trunk, then I'm going to find that place. Got that? If there is a place like that, then yes, that's where we'll be able to build a new life and have children, so that they won't grow up to be rats or Morlocks, but human beings. For that, we have to fight. But we mustn't bury ourselves alive in the ground in advance, curl up in a tight little ball and meekly snuff it. We mustn't do that. It wasn't a waste of time coming here. I sensed that it wasn't. Artyom just spat. But it was the poison he spat out. The bile. For some reason, the old man's gap-toothed smile made him feel better. It eased his tension. The old man was ludicrous and awkward. But Artyom suddenly had the feeling that they were on the same side. Homer felt something similar and waved to Artyom like a boisterous youngster. I'm ready. They walked stealthily through the station. Hanging above the blank opening of the tunnel, the station clock, a local sacred relic, showed that it was night. So it was night for everyone. Artyom was the only one who could have disagreed with it, but Artyom was already leaving the station. The hall was almost deserted, except for someone having a late cup of tea in the kitchen. The crimson public lighting was dimmed. People had packed themselves away in their tents, lit up the weak little light diodes inside, and transformed their tarpaulin into a theater of shadows. Each stage offered its own performance. As they walked past Sukhoi's tent, it was a figure leaning over a table, and then they walked past the one where Anya was sitting with her face buried in her hands. The old man asked cautiously, "Don't you want to say goodbye?" "No one to say it to, Granddad." Homer didn't argue. "To Alexeyevskaya," Artyom announced to the sentries at the entrance to the southern tunnel. "Sukhoi knows about it," the sentries saluted. If he knew, then he knew. Thanks for not going up on the surface again. They climbed down the welded iron ladder onto the tracks. "The pipe," Artyom said to himself as he stepped into the darkness, tenderly touching the rough, moldy cast iron of a tunnel liner, measuring with a glance the 5 meters high ceiling of the tunnel and its fathomless depth. The pipe is calling.